Even though Election Day in the U.S. is still over 16 months away, the coverage of the candidates is in full swing. On one side, Hillary Clinton has made it clear that she wants to be the first female commander-in-chief. But can she fire up a weary American electorate? And then there's Donald Trump, the Republican billionaire disruptor who has commanded crowds and grown in popularity, doing the exact opposite of what presidential candidates are supposed to do. Now, what does all this mean for the likely outcome of the 2016 American election? Hello, I'm Anna Sanial, and this is Between the Lines. Still well over a year away, the race for the U.S. presidency has captivated audiences in Asia, searching for clues about how America's pivot to the region will play out following the election in 2016. So far, the intrigue has far outweighed the content. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, equally controversial yet worlds apart in their credentials and in their appeal. Clinton, the internationalist, is the clear frontrunner for the Democratic Party. Steeped in political experience, portrayed as American royalty, Clinton, by many measures, holds the middle ground. But the ground could be shifting. Polls indicate an electorate impatient with the status quo and frustrated at the lack of trust that incidents such as her private email server have created. Now, on the other side of the fence, Donald Trump has become unexpectedly competitive. Currently the leading Republican contender, Trump has gathered momentum on nationalist issues like immigration and jobs, but not without alienating key vote blocks that the Republicans need to win over in November. Now, the controversies haven't stopped the pollsters. In a general election matchup, Trump has narrowed the deficit to Clinton just to about 6 points. But first, he needs to win the nomination, something the GOP establishment will likely fight against. Well, tonight we take a snapshot of the race to the U.S. election. We begin with a look at Hillary Clinton's position, and later on in the show, we'll concentrate on the Trump phenomenon. And joining me for this segment is Sean King, Senior Vice President of Park Strategies, a business advisory firm in New York, and Dr. Dina Wisnu, co-founder and the head of the Graduate School of Diplomacy at Paramadina University in Jakarta. Thank you both for being here. Now, Hillary Clinton is the presumptive Democratic nominee, but how big of a scandal is her use of a private email server when she was Secretary of State? Is that going to hurt her chances? Sean, let me start with you.
Yeah, it's definitely hurt her chances. Among Democrats, she would probably be considered the toughest on national security, and there really are national security implications in this email situation. And it brings back a lot of the trustworthiness and character issues from the Clinton years that still rankle some. But, you know, the investigations into this probably won't be finished until after the primary, so we'll see if it has any real effect among her base. But, yeah, it is a real problem.
Dina, do you agree with Sean's assessment about this, or is things going as they planned? It seems a very choreographed road to the convention for Hillary Clinton.
It is still far too early to say whether this will have any bad influence on her race. But the fact of the matter is Hillary Clinton always has a steep path towards presidential race. In the past, trust was a problem for her as well. So the fact that she is so experienced makes people have more ammunition as well to say that she should have known.
Sean, do you agree with that? What could be the explanation for somebody like Hillary Clinton, somebody who has, you know, been inside the Beltway for so long, to use a personal email server versus her State Department email?
Well, I think it's that experience is why she did do it, because she probably wanted to avoid freedom of information requests on the documents and/or you know, help expand the gray area for, say, her aides and she conducting political business while on state business. We won't know until we know, but obviously she was trying to keep stuff out of the public eye while working for the State Department. So it's probably that experience made her wary of exposing her emails in the first place, which is why she did this.
Now, we've heard about some of her softening poll numbers in key battleground states like Ohio. She recently had to interrupt her vacation to go back and campaign. Is that a worrying sign, do you think, Dina?
Well, the Democrats needs to be more aware that the pendulum of election is swinging away from them this time around, given that President Obama has been in office for twice of tenure. So the Democratic, candidates needs to be more sensitive. Oftentimes, election is not necessarily about what's rational. It's more about what people think they're trying to hide. So who knows? It's still too early, but Hillary Clinton had the experience that she has to really fight hard for her credential and her credibility.
Sean, is that the sense that you're getting on the ground in the States? 8 years of Obama, would electing Hillary Clinton be like a third term? Is there some kind of fatigue? I talked about a weary American electorate in the introduction. Is that something that's a real phenomenon?
I actually don't consider the American electorate that weary this time around. They're certainly not as cranky as they were in '92, '94, '06, or '08. Right now, her only competition are Democrats, and I don't sense an Obama weariness among Democrats. That'll come up in the general. This tightening of the race was inevitable. It was never going to be a coronation. Bernie Sanders has given her some fits on the left. I don't think he has the organization or money to really challenge her. Right now, her biggest challenge would be herself on the email issues, or if Joe Biden, the vice president, were to get into the race. But right now, everything looks great for Biden because he's not being challenged as a candidate. But if he were to get in, very late in the game, I might add, his numbers would come down inevitably due to attacks and more scrutiny. And again, would he have the money in the organization to keep pace with Clinton, which is hard to beat. So these are inevitable tightening of the polls, but I still see this, on the Democratic side at least, as her race to lose.
Yeah, let's talk about a potential Biden entry into this race. Would this be something that is completely unheard of? What's the motivation here? Is it that Hillary Clinton might be vulnerable in the general election, in the national election, for Biden to enter the race?
Well, the motivation is that any vice president sees him or herself as potential presidential material. Hillary does look vulnerable. Joe Biden is likable, he also was the first to come out in the cabinet for gay marriage. He would have a lot of credibility with certain constituencies within the Democratic Party, but then people are also likely to bring up his role in the Clarence Thomas hearings in 1991. That would rankle some women's groups. So sure, he sees a potential opportunity because Hillary's slipping, but I still think it would be a very long uphill climb for him were he to enter at this late date.
Dina, let's talk a little bit about the Obama administration pivot to Asia. Certainly, Mrs. Clinton, as Secretary of State, was key in this, and she's visited Asia many times. What's your perspective on the kind of president she would be in terms of this rebalancing of power, something that's said a lot in American foreign policy, but have we really seen the fruits of that?
Exactly. If Hillary Clinton somehow becomes the primary contender of the Republican Party this time, we will expect that most of the foreign policy that is of the Obama administration will continue on and get steeper. I have seen and I have talked to many people from the foreign affairs of the Secretary of State, and they basically trying to engage more and more, and they rely a lot on the partnership with their alliance, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Thailand, to deepen their understanding and build trust with other rising economies in the region, including Indonesia.
Sean, how much of this does it really matter to the American electorate, especially at this stage? Obviously, we're in Asia, so this pivot to Asia, this rebalance resonates a lot, certainly because of conflicts that are going on in the South China Sea and so forth. But foreign policy, is that really going to be the centerpiece of any president's campaign or their first steps as president?
Unfortunately, the Asia pivot, which I do think is very real under Obama, will mean nothing in the U.S. election. Nobody here cares, I'm sad to say. Foreign policy could in the event of another terrorist attack, but right now most of the issues are domestic. If there is a foreign policy angle, it would be, say, fear of China as regards trade, maybe ISIS, and something of that nature. But the Asia pivot, which I think is real, I think Obama should be commended for it. I think Hillary was a main driver behind it, which is why it's so disappointing to see herself distance herself from TPP in the primary. I think she would continue it. So the pivot's real, but unfortunately, nobody here really cares or even knows about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about her not being a foregone conclusion. This isn't a coronation, as you've mentioned, but is she really the Democrats' only hope in the general election to counter another heavyweight, whoever that may be? It could be Donald Trump, right? It could be Jeb Bush. Let me hear from both of you.
Well, I'll take that first. I think Biden would be, if Biden could get through a Democratic primary, which right now I don't think he could, he would be a formidable challenger to anybody from the Republican side, even taking into account his tendency to commit gaffes and put his foot in his mouth. I think Jim Webb, the former Navy Secretary and Senator from Virginia, while he has virtually no chance to win the Democratic primary, I think he would be a very, very difficult general election candidate. He probably knows Asia better than anybody, for your viewers, and you know, his best hope right now would probably be the Secretary of Defense and a Hillary cabinet. But I think the best Democratic hope in a general election would probably be Jim Webb of Virginia. But again, he has no chance of winning the nomination.
Mm-hmm. And Dina, what are your thoughts before we go to the break?
Yeah. Looking at the race from Indonesia, I think Hillary Clinton is our best bet, you know, from the Democratic Party. And the fact that Donald Trump running in the other camp shows that the biggest issue here is to make the statement to American public that how to make America great again, you know, that's the message, right, from Donald Trump. This means that at the end of the day, they have to really discuss, including Democratic candidates, on how they would bring the goodies, you know, to the American people.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, after the break, does Donald Trump's elevation into American politics have as much endurance as it does hype? We'll be back in a moment to discuss.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words. Nobody would be tougher on ISIS than Donald Trump. Nobody.
Republican candidate Donald Trump there with plans to build a 3,000-kilometer wall to keep out illegal immigrants. It's one of the many outrageous propositions by the Republican candidate that seem to have struck a chord with some voters. Now let's drill down into the Trump factor with Bernard Bate, Associate Professor of Social Sciences at Yale NUS College, the University of Singapore. He joins us from Connecticut. And still with us, Sean King from Park Strategies in New York. Bernard, let's start with you. Donald Trump has really sucked up all the media coverage, or most of the media coverage, leaving the other Republican contenders with the other half, let's say, for the Republican side. Is this what's translated into his bump in the polls, simply because he's gotten so much exposure?
Well, it is certainly a disturbing emergence within the public sphere in America today that Donald Trump has been able to capture as much attention as he has, basically by appealing to the worst in us and the worst of us. He has deployed nativism in the past, such racist concepts as birtherism, challenging Obama's nativity and citizenship. And just recently appealed, just within the last few days, to a concept of the silent majority. Harks back to 1969 Nixonian politics that was really a kind of dog whistle to a disaffected white voter base that felt that the excesses of the 1960s in the civil rights movement, as well as in the new kinds of cultural formations, had gone too far.
So let me ask you, Bernard, what is it about Mr. Trump that he keeps getting away with making these outrageous statements, things that would have really taken all the air out of other people's candidacies that would have been deal breakers for other people, but just not him?
Well, it is a curious thing, isn't it? And I think it stumped a lot of the political punditry in the United States today. Why isn't he crashing and burning after things, outrageous things that he says, would have collapsed any other candidate in the past? One idea is that we seem to be in a new era, one in which nativism, white supremacy seems to have a base that is mobilizable. He seems to be articulating things that a lot of people say that he is saying that they cannot say, a critique of political correctness, some say. He just seems to be very, very talented at doing this. He's always able to keep attention on him by throwing another stink bomb, as some have said, into the public sphere, and just continuing to have people pay attention to him, regardless of the awful things he says, in some respects because of the awful things he says.
Sean, what's your assessment of this? Has Donald Trump stumped the punditry?
For now, I think he'll eventually flame out, but he's certainly lasted longer than I thought he would. But I think the fact is he just doesn't care. He doesn't need this job. He doesn't owe anybody anything. And people agree or disagree because he's all over the map on his positions, even along the lines of Republican Party orthodoxy. You know, not only has he insulted Mexican immigrants, he's also insulted John McCain, a U.S. war hero. But I think people are relating to the fact that he just doesn't care and doesn't need this job. And again, we're 6 months out from the first caucus. I think he'll come back to earth once people start getting serious about this, and especially in a state where, in Iowa, where organization and evangelical support means so much. But for now, I think a lot of it is the entertainment factor. And I hear people saying, you know, what did Trump say today? It's almost become like a sports or a professional wrestling spectacle.
Now, do you think that some theories put it so that this is a low information stage of the vote? People aren't requiring the level of policy detail that they would as the race moves forward. Do you think Trump is benefiting from that? I mean, he has released some specifics about his immigration policy.
Absolutely. People are not really serious about the election yet. And his policies, I think he's really making this up as he goes along. You know, I saw him on Bloomberg the other night, and you could tell he was getting the fiscal deficit confused with the trade deficit. He said the Bible was his favorite book, but it was too personal to say which part of it he liked best. When he's attacking China, he sometimes gets it confused with Japan, forgetting that Japan's our #1 ally in Asia and China our #1 rival. Again, I think he's making this up as he goes along. He's having fun. It's probably gone better and longer than he ever thought it would, so he's going to ride it for as long as he can. And if he doesn't need to do this, he'll just build another skyscraper or launch another TV show. So he's definitely benefiting from the fact that people are not yet serious about the election.
Bernard, if Donald Trump is making these mistakes, I mean, these mistakes that regular politicians won't get away with, is this a way for other Republicans to attack him? You know, nothing they seem to throw at him, not that he was once a Democrat, that he supported abortion rights, that he supported universal health care, has really stuck to him. He seems to be made of Teflon. What do you think?
Well, I mean, first of all, I agree with Sean that this is he's kind of in a win-win situation. He's going to benefit whether he continues on in this quixotic race or whether he stands down. He'll win just by sheer exposure. I think at this particular moment, and the other thing to say is at this particular moment, it's very early in the game. We're in late August, a little bit of a time of strange distractions in the United States, especially in the political sphere. And I don't think that anything that the Republicans are going to throw at him right now is going to do very much. However, in the long run, it's very unlikely that he's going to have any kind of real traction. He doesn't have the organization structure, as Sean mentioned. His favorability, unfavorability ratings are way underwater, something on the order of 30% favorable and 60% unfavorable. He doesn't have the kind of endorsements that the other candidates have. People like Jeb Bush leads these handily. And in the end, even the polls that we're looking at are actually quite soft. They're public polls. They're asking adults who they might vote for right now. And they're not doing the kinds of analytical polls that campaigns do, which is starting out with voter lists and registration of registered voters, which are showing far weaker support for Donald Trump than it appears at the moment.
So do you think, Bernard, that if Trump does flame out, as some polling is suggesting that he will do as this race tightens, that he'll eventually throw his support behind the eventual Republican nominee? That's something he seems to be weighing. I know it's necessary for him to be on the ballot in the South Carolina primary to say that he would do that. What are the chances?
I really don't know. I mean, who knows the mind of Donald Trump, really? He very famously in the first of the debates said that he would not commit to not running as an independent. He's now saying perhaps he might commit in that way, but it's really difficult to know. As Sean said, he's all over the map ideologically. Where would he throw his support is anyone's guess, I think.
Sean, what are your thoughts on that? Would Donald Trump run as an independent? Will he back somebody like Jeb Bush if he becomes the Republican nominee for president?
He has, as Bernard says, lately been opening the door, giving himself some wiggle room to commit to not running as a third candidate. He probably would endorse somebody. I don't think it matters. I don't think there's like a real Trump demographic or base. His support is not issues-based. So those people, I don't think they would listen to him. I think once Trump's candidacy is over, it's over, and he's forgotten, and he's back to show business. He's not part of the political establishment or power structure. I don't really think in a Trump endorsement, if somebody even wants to accept it, would mean that much. I think once he's out for good.
So you don't think that Mr. Trump has changed American presidential politics for good, that this is an anomaly?
I do. And again, like Bernard said, it's August. In August 2007, Rudy Giuliani had 33% of Republican support. Fred Thompson had 20%. John McCain trailed in a distant third. And on this very date, 4 years ago, Governor Rick Perry of Texas was leading the Republican field. So to be leading the polls in August seems to be the kiss of death in modern American presidential politics.
Bernard, one last question for you. Do you think Donald Trump has done some damage to the Republican brand?
Well, that is possible. I mean, right now the Spanish language media is up in arms about Donald Trump. He's really said some truly, truly appalling things, treated a major journalist in a press conference very, very badly. And right now there is no pretense within the Spanish media, the Spanish-speaking media, of any kind of objectivity or fair and balanced reporting of Donald Trump. Jorge Ramos recently said that he is the loudest voice of intolerance, hatred, and division in the United States today. So I think that he's done some damage, certainly to himself and possibly to the Republican Party. And I think that's something that the Bushes, I think the last two, George W. Bush as well as his brother, have been trying to fight against within the Republican Party. It's possible that they now have a harder task ahead of them than they did prior to Trump.
Well, thank you very, very much indeed, Bernard Bate. And thank you, Sean King, for being on the show. Now, that's it for this show. Monday on Between the Lines, trillions wiped off equity markets since China's currency was devalued this month. The stock market has lost more than 40% since peaking in June. Are investors worldwide right to be nervous? That's Monday on Between the Lines. And a reminder that the show is available online at channelnewsasia.com/video. Goodbye for now.